Welcome to Sunday, Charles.
Hey, Jason. Great to be here.
We sounded very quiet for a second, but I've got that resolved. Now, Charles, we have a very special guest joining us today from the lovely, well, the formerly lovely country of Sweden. Many people will recall Dr. Biljana Martinovsky. Hello, Biljana, how are you?
Hello, everybody.
Happy New Year.
Yes.
Happy New Year. Thank you very much.
It's lovely to have you with us, Biljana. It's been some time since I've seen you there in Sweden. How are things going since our last encounter?
Yes, I prepared a little bit to update you of what has been going on, and I'm very happy that my expectations and predictions were correct. We are in a situation where the so-called Center Party, which I call the Swedish Macron Party, is actually cooperating with the Social Democrats, and they are supposed to be in opposition. They're supposed to be right-wing and left-wing, but as we expected, there was no other option, so to say, because they definitely want to be against the Sweden Democrats. So they're ready to do absolutely anything just to keep themselves going. And as I expected, Annie Lööf, who is the Soros admirer and Soros promoted, she's a member of the Trilateral Commission, and she joined the Bilderberg Group recently. She is favored in this situation. And she's now, all of a sudden, to everybody, she's except to us, who already had predicted that a long time ago, she's calling the shots. She's deciding what is going to happen with Sweden.
Of course, we'll be talking
very
about
important decisions.
Yeah, we'll be talking about Social Democrats today. I'm sure you've seen Alexandria Ocasio Cortez very much in the news in the United States. And the other topic that you've discussed with us quite a bit, Biljana, is censorship. So there's just something quite strange going on that I wanted to bring to our viewers' attention. Also, Charles, I wanted to bring this to your attention. You know, I started noticing about 2 days ago, the main Crowdsource the Truth channel, of course, is the Jason Goodman channel on YouTube, and we've got over 79,000 subscribers on there. And typically when we start a Sunday with Charles show, we're about 3 minutes in right here, there'd be something on the order of 200-300 people watching, and it's a pretty steady move up to usually about somewhere between 600 and 1,000. And what I've noticed is that we have less than 100 on the Jason Goodman channel and over 100 on Crowdsource the Truth 2, a channel with less than 1/7 the total subscribers. So there seems to be some pretty clear suppression going on with YouTube here, trying to shut people out of watching what's going on the Jason Goodman channel. And Biljana, I don't know if you've heard about this dust up with Patreon, but Patreon is sort of an alternative platform that we've been using to both monetize the channel and kind of minimize the trolling. And this is one example of where something like Patreon is very useful. A lot of people have been unhappy with Patreon because they have been, they are accused of violating the First Amendment rights of Carl Benjamin and Milo Yiannopoulos by throwing them off of the platform. But I don't think we know that full story there yet. And I certainly don't think that Google, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, or any of these others are any different. So I hope that people will not take their anger out on Patreon, because it really just takes it out on the creators like Crowdsource the Truth. People can still become sponsors of the show by going to patreon.com/crowdsource the truth. But we've got quite a lot of material to get to today. So Charles, should we just get right into the slides, or was there something you wanted to start us off with?
Well, I think we should congratulate the art department again. I mean, I don't know how the art department is managing to outdo itself every other day with something as wonderful as this image. And it really is interesting, you know, now we've done quite a few of these, and people are really telling me, people come up to me, whatever, that they really enjoy the art in particular. They like listening to us and getting into the depth that we try to get into every week. But I got to tell you, Jason, I mean, you got to give those art department, that extensive team of illustrators and storyboard people. I forget how many 100,000 people you have working on it.
Right. Well, it's me, in between responding to fraudulent lawsuits and interviewing other people, I'm working on these graphics.
That's very well done. Very well done.
Thank you. And of course, Charles, we've got the playlist, which we always like to remind everybody they can visit. And even though the Jason Goodman channel is being actively suppressed, or so it would seem, by YouTube, people can go there and they can see all of the Sunday with Charles episodes, as well as all of the Charles Ortel is Closing In episodes. You know, this Dumby episode, we introduced everybody to the character of Dumby, which of course is Alexandria Ocasio Cortez. And that wasn't exactly a closing in, it was more of a phone call episode. I do appreciate you accommodating my travel schedule. We did not get a chance to talk about Rod Rosenstein's announced departure, but that certainly makes the Kiss the Cook image more appropriate than ever. We can maybe touch on that pretty soon, but why don't we get right into the slides?
Sure, sure. So, Biljana, you are a veteran. I forget whether this is your third or fourth appearance with us.
More than that.
Or is it more? Yeah, actually, with Jason over there, quite a few appearances, and we thank you for your time and your perspectives.
Yeah.
This episode came together sort of all at once because Alexandria, some people refer to her as occasional cortex, occasional use of brainstem cortex, managed to get involved in some big debate with I forget whom on Twitter, where they tried to rope her into defending that democratic socialism meant that whatever was going on in Venezuela, and she fired back. She said, no, not Venezuela. I love what's going on in Sweden. So when she said that, and when she seemed to embrace the notion that democratic socialism as practiced in Sweden is something we ought to try here in the United States of America, light bulbs went off in my head right away. I said, we have got to get Biljana back on this show. So thank you on short notice for coming back with us to talk about this.
Because, you know, Charles, when I was in Sweden, and Biljana, you can confirm this, so many Swedish people told me that democratic socialism destroyed the country of Sweden.
I think that if we want to understand it, we need to look at it historically. So historically, I would say this social democracy or democratic party has started as a movement and appeared in a time when Sweden was experiencing great difficulties due to climate. There was a very intense immigration. And as you know, the biggest immigration was to the United States, where millions of people left due to famine. So we're talking about a very different time, more than 100 years ago. That was a very different time. And I can imagine that at that time, these social democratic ideas were more suitable and they were necessary or functional due to that immigration and to the previous famine. So you cannot see this only in the perspective of the last 10 years or the Second World War. During the Second World War, the Social Democrats actually supported Nazism and Hitler's regime. At that time, people didn't, not we, because I am not from that period, but as I hear from Swedish people, They didn't really know what was going on. So they were positive to Germany, and they had positive relations with Germany, which has a very long, I mean, Sweden has a very long history with Germany, and has strived to have good relations with Prussia, for instance, before it became Germany, as well as with Russia. But it has been kind of more positive towards Prussia and Germany.
Diana, we've got Steph Wantel on Periscope is saying, what are we complaining about? Sweden is the 7th richest country in the world. I'm not sure that's the complaint that we're talking about, but so many people felt that the uncontrolled migration in Sweden, the soaring crime rate, these are the aspects of democratic socialism that I think most people I spoke to in Sweden were not happy with.
Well, I mean, if Sweden was a beneficiary from the Second World War. Sweden was officially neutral, did not participate, was not destroyed by the war, and was not helped by the Marshall Plan as other countries were, or any other plans. But it did not experience the devastation that other countries experienced, and did not lose even part of its population as other countries did, particularly Russia and Germany. So in that sense, we can hardly compare Sweden to other countries in that sense. It actually traded with different sides and smartly avoided conflicts on its own territory. So I don't think we can. We're not complaining. We're not here to complain. We are here to address, or in our case, to inform you about the situation as it is now after the election. And Sweden, the way we knew it before, it's not here anymore. It's a different kind of Sweden. So a lot of people are feeling nostalgia for it. So the so-called folkhem, the home of the people, it's gone. And there is still the spirit, and the people who created it and who wished it and who envisioned it are still alive. They're still around, and even new generations that feel that way. For instance, Sweden Democrats, this was their main concept. They wanted to go back to folkhemmet, which is the typical social democratic term and concept and idea. And social democrats changed. So they are much more globalist oriented than they were before. Right. And Sweden Democrats are leftist party. They're social democrats who are more interested in closing the borders, or protecting the borders, at least protecting the population from violence. So it is not, to your audience, I would like to say, I'm not here to complain, nor am I here to discuss how poor Sweden is today or anything of that kind, because this is not the case. Right. Sweden continues to be a pretty good and rich and self-sufficient country. And that is why there is a chance for it to make it. Because there is a hurricane. I experience the whole situation as a hurricane, and it's like a storm that is taking Europe right now. And you know what's going on in Paris, what's going on in Marseille, what's going on in Nice. So the yellow vests are not happening for no reason. They're happening because people in Europe are exposed to extreme forms of very sadistic, in its quality, violence, and our politicians, we all experience it. Our politicians are misleading us, and they're even attacking us if we decry the violence. So you can see that there are yellow vests also in Sweden, not only in France.
Well, and this
also
is
in
this is
England
what we
and-
want to
and-
focus on, Biljana, how there are similarities in the United States where we've got politicians who are misleading us, and if you try to question that, your videos on YouTube get suppressed, you get kicked off of Twitter, you get deplatformed by Visa and MasterCard, etc. So why don't we get into the slides, and then as these topics come up, you can embellish what we're talking about, and we'll carry on. If that's all right with you,
Fine by
Charles?
me. So,
Yes, I just wanted to say I heard something very, very funny and interesting. I thought would be interesting for your audience.
Sure.
I heard that a Swedish woman was calling her son, who works in Germany, talking about censorship, I mean.
Oh, yeah.
And as she called him, all of a sudden she heard the voice of Erdogan. So somehow
The Turkish
a group
president?
of Islamists had hacked into the German phone system. So even if you call from abroad and you call to someone in Germany, you're actually hearing Erdogan's speech before
Wow.
his election.
Wow.
I think that's a pretty special censorship.
yeah, that's a real privilege to hear that speech.
That's bizarre.
Well, just one quick overview comment before we get into the details. A simplistic way that I think about the pros and cons of socialism or more government involvement in an economy, if we go back in the United States case to the data that does exist back to 1929 on comparable basis, back in 1929 and really through the 30s and 40s until about maybe the late 80s, the all-in cost of a government worker on average was a lot less than the all-in cost of a private sector worker. So it made sense, if you were thinking about an economy and extremists in the United States Depression case, if you had everybody in trouble, but you had a pay scale for workers in the government that's a lot lower than for the private sector, it made sense to create phantom jobs because these people were not all that expensive. And maybe hire more of them than you otherwise might to do these infrastructure projects, which is exactly what happened in the 30s, 40s, 50s with the interstate. All that made sense because back then in the United States we also didn't have that much debt. We had some government debt built up for World War II, but the United States for many decades the richer people were very thrifty and it wasn't possible to borrow. It was actually much more customary to own your home with no mortgage if you owned a home. So all that stuff and a lot of the literature, American literature, embraces the supposed success of government intervention in the Depression and World War II period and early Korean War period. But we're in a very different place in the United States, and I would hazard in Sweden, we're in a different place there too as well, that the average government worker, and it's very tough to figure out the true landed cost of an expensive government worker who then would get a pension maybe in 20 years at some inflated rate and then live to collect that pension for say another 30 years. It's really tough to do that math in a rigorous way. And I'm quite convinced our own government doesn't want to do that math in a rigorous way because it would show such a gigantic gap between how much these protected government workers and in our universities, the protected tenure track professors and the non-governmental organization foundation world where there's really no scrutiny of pay and no scrutiny of how hard you actually work, no scrutiny of whether you really need as many people as get hired in these different places. So we're at a very different moment here where the yellow vest situation that you describe in France, and we saw the same tensions that brought crowds out for Trump and crowds out for Bernie, believing in this country that the system isn't working. The people, I think, know a lot better than the pundits and the professors what's truly going on. It is tough to find a job today where in the private sector where you have job security and you have the prospect of a pension, the prospect of working, let's say, for a full 20 years or 40 years to collect your pension. Yet, in the public sector, this Nancy Pelosi is a multi-millionaire. Her husband is wealthy. A lot of these people who pull the strings in our country and have these grand plans are either themselves wealthy or backed by people like George Soros or an hock to people like George Soros, who do not have the true interests of the middle class and the lower class, the earning class, at stake. They certainly don't. So this is a very interesting confluence of events where in a smaller country in Sweden, you're experiencing, sadly, firsthand the tensions and the stresses that happen when an intolerant elite decides that you're saying stuff that doesn't comport with their views. We're seeing intolerance manifest itself ever more in this country because these great, in theory, great tools that have been created, the social media tools,
being blocked,
the limited number of large companies that control the mainstream media, the degree to which orthodoxy and intolerance has crept into influence shapers in the big universities and the non-governmental organizations, married with the fact that there are a very limited number of payment processing services, creates this enormous leverage that I think this team that is really trying to enforce a worldview upon we the people is actually very close to having a pernicious hold on power in the largest economy in the world. Not to mention, what has already happened in places like the UK and France and Germany and places like Japan and elsewhere. So this is not a minor set of issues that we're confronting here. And I really appreciate the fact that we can get on with you periodically, Biljana, and take the pulse of what's going on in Sweden and compare notes about what's going on here. And then we lay this marker down. This presentation is dated today. We'll come back and think about it. We're going to talk about some of our earlier presentations with you a little bit later. But very grateful for the privilege, Biljana, and glad that you're safe and warm back in Sweden.
Who says she's warm? I bet you it's freezing in Sweden right now.
Well, she's inside of it. As she pays her heating bill, I guess.
Yeah, it is kind of cold, yeah, right here where I am.
Good. Well, we could probably jump into the next slide.
Yeah.
And this is just to remind, your viewership's growing by leaps and bounds, I guess, up to 79,100.
That's pretty admirable considering the level of suppression that's going on. I look at other channels, and we did a video yesterday about 9/11 with Ole Damagard, who's a very well-known guy, and that's a very searched term, and that video is struggling to get 2,000 or 3,000 views. It doesn't make sense. I look at channels with less than half the subscribership doing videos about other things that are getting 10, 12,000. I feel like something's going on.
It reminds me of the cartoon that we did. I mean, I don't know what that's up to now, but that cartoon,
Mrs.
Bill should be...
that should be tearing up the charts.
Should be coining it. Yeah. But this slide is up, particularly for the new viewers, to remind everybody that the approach we're taking here is different than the standard podcast, different than the standard Sunday news show or news show for that matter, the mainstream. What we're trying to do is encourage a viewership, and I'm very pleased to report that a lot of the viewers, every week, more and more people get more engaged, interacting with us, coming up with suggestions, circulating this stuff around, prodding politicians to do the right thing, asking journalists to open their eyes to the truth, and indeed, crowdsourcing the truth. So our approach here is not to lay down from on high the law as the way we see it, which is kind of the approach I think that Jake Tapper at CNN takes and all these MSA, you're an idiot unless you believe what we have to say. No, it's to show you the source material, give you fertile ground to think about these issues for yourself, weave a narrative to help you think and prod your thinking, but we try to provide you with the access to the underlying data and analysis so that you can form your own judgments. And really, the best way of advancing this cause here, of breaking the hold that these unregulated globalists appear to have for the moment on too many countries, is to do kind of what happened behind the Iron Curtain. Before the Iron Curtain fell in Eastern Europe, there were these pamphlets that were circulated. I forget the name. Maybe you would know, Biljana. It's like Samizdat or some. I can't remember the name exactly, but there was no media, and people had to share the word. So they literally went down to mimeograph machines and copy shops or whatever.
That
and the
blue ink smelled so weird, Charles.
Yeah, I remember those days actually. But that in part is the word of mouth approach of sharing these ideas outside the traditional channels really, I think, caused a lot of good things to happen in that time frame. And certainly now, 30 years later, with access to different technology, we're able to share these pamphlets, if you will, and when all these presentations are free of charge and easily accessible on YouTube by downloading them, we're able to share this material, give people time to think about the actual source material. Some of these topics are pretty deep. Many people, myself included, when I started on this project, I would say a number of years ago, I didn't really have the kind of understanding of economics that I think you need to have to make an educated set of arguments about what's going on in these deeply troubling times. This is not business as usual. This is not like a minor bump in the road. We are looking at a period here where before long, a lot of people can be replaced by these new technologies that are getting more and more adherents around the world. And we're talking about a trend shift, like as happened, for example, in farming in the United States, when people went away from using horses to using tractors. I mean, you have a gigantic negative impact on unemployment if you're not skilled. You have great stress factors created now because prior administrations, not purely Barack Obama, but others, have built up too much debt on this economy. We have $22 trillion of government debt on this economy. It's a scary amount of money. That's the real debt that we know about. Doesn't count the soft debt. You know, the cost of getting rid of excess public sector workers, you have to pay them severance, the cost of funding their pensions, which are not funded. You know, when you start thinking about the true debt on just this economy and then on the whole world, you know, you realize that a day of reckoning is at hand. Central bankers have kept interest rates too low for too long. Governments are running deficits too large for too long, and there isn't unlimited money. I mean, you get to a certain point, and nations are going to, excuse my language, Biljana, they're going to puke on the dollar. They're going to say, like, I don't want the U.S. dollar. There's too much debt. You know, so
Exactly.
This is a show to try to engage you, the audience. So we really appreciate. I particularly appreciate the many viewers who do regularly watch this and share it around. And at YouTube, I don't appreciate it if you're suppressing this show or other shows. And if that is the case, there are workarounds.
There's multiple things going on right now. I don't know if you can see this from where you sit, Charles, but I'm normally watching the show as it plays to make sure it's going out live and everything. And the stream that I'm watching has been knocked down to lower resolution, as if there's some sort of crimp in the hose that's bringing internet here to the apartment. And whenever I try to come up with some sort of explanation for what could be causing it, maybe the temperature of the computer, it's kind of cool in the room today. I don't hear the fan going on the computer, so it couldn't be overheating and throttling its own speed. I don't know what's going on.
Is that going to be the book you're going to write?
I don't know what's going on.
I don't know what the hell happened.
Yeah, it's sort of like a tribute to Hillary Clinton.
Right.
Well, Charles, you know, the other thing that we should mention is that people can communicate with you on Twitter. You're on there regularly, and it's a good way to reach you through direct message. You are, of course, at Charles Ortel, and your Twitter following, is it growing? Or
a little bit, yeah. It was stuck around 34.3, and it's just inches up to 34.4, and probably tomorrow morning I'll wake up and it'll be down to 34.3 again. I don't know what's going on there.
And of course, people can follow Biljana on there as well. Whoops. Oh, that was supposed to be Biljana. Let's make sure we get Biljana on there. Everything is going very slowly on the computer today. I just don't know what to say. It was fine the minute before we started broadcasting, so.
Yeah, you see it now, how slow it is. That's amazing.
I know. This is 300 megabit per second internet. It's working worse than it does at like a hotel with 1 megabit. But people can follow Biljana. She is B. Martinovsky, and you can direct message her, ask her any questions about the information we're going to discuss.
Yes, please do.
Yes.
You're welcome to do that. Please do.
Yeah, and also we need to get Biljana some more followers. Unlike other people who pay for followers, we're not in the business of doing that. But I would really encourage crowdsourcers to follow Biljana, because she always has interesting tweets and a perspective that you don't readily get here in the United States of America or really anywhere. So I encourage people to do that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're all welcome.
So
I'm
what
not
I'm
sure
going
what's
to do,
going on Twitter. I mean, we are not really, it seems like there is really censorship on Twitter. People are disappearing and they're losing their audiences. Lots of people are following me and still my numbers are not increasing. I'm not
Yeah.
sure what is going on there. And I really didn't have time to study and find out, and even to confront Twitter about it.
Right.
But of course, if there is interest in the situation in Sweden, I will be more than glad to update people and inform. This is what I do. But I generally write about just about any country, not only Sweden, but quite a lot about Sweden lately. I think more and more about Europe, actually, because I see the same phenomena, the same processes
Yeah.
in different countries in Europe. So to me, it all looks quite manufactured, as Tucker exposed the media the other day. Very funnily, actually, they all use the word manufactured. Trump is manufacturing the issues with the border
crisis. Yes. Yeah.
wall.
Well, I'll tell you, Biljana, along the lines of Twitter unfollowings and YouTube suppression, I think we're either living in the most coincidental times in history, or the people who are social media influencers who are talking about the subjects that we're discussing that are unpopular with those in charge have some influence over these social media companies and are able to make these things happen.
There's no doubt about it.
People
I
are
have
telling
no
me
doubt
that
about it.
only Crowdsource the Truth 2 comes up when you do a search. So there could be a variety of methods in place trying
Yes.
to suppress this video, but we will press on. Charles, you've created another presentation for us here that we should just dive right into.
yeah, what we're going to do, Biljana and members of the audience, is I'm just going to update you on this page some of the stories that I think are particularly interesting. Then we're going to dive a little bit into some of the history, so for the new viewers, of what we've already said about Sweden. Then I propose to take us through a few slides just on the economic facts that I've been able to tease out of UNCTAD, which is the UN division that specializes in this information, and I actually think does pretty good work. And once we have that out on the table, then, Biljana, I propose we go into those of your slides that you wanted to pick.
I have just sent them to you, to Jason. I
Okay.
just sent them right now.
Okay.
So he has them.
Okay. So that's just the flow. So we'll get right into it. There's been a lot of breaking news here, and Donald Trump exploding last night on calling into our mutual friend Janine Pirro to really raise holy hell about what apparently happened, which is that prior to Mueller being appointed as special counsel, there are reports out now that the FBI decided to open an investigation into whether Donald Trump posed a security threat to the United States of America. And that's like one of those things where you're sort of like, dude, I mean, how stupid are you? I mean, you can't, the President of the United States holds the highest security clearance possible. And how is it that these people in the FBI who managed under Mueller and under Comey to do so much negative work, so much damage to the standing of the FBI by giving not just Hillary Clinton a pass on a serious mishandling of classified information case, but also deciding that it was okay to break precedent and willy-nilly start vacuuming up information about Americans resident in the United States of America who might have been tied to the opponent of Hillary Clinton and the ultimate victor in the 2016 campaign. Nobody in the FBI, in my opinion, should have the right to open up a counterintelligence investigation. That's different than a criminal investigation. A counterintelligence investigation asks the question, does Donald Trump pose a threat to the national security of the United States? Imagine if the FBI had done that to Obama. And let's think about the difference between, some of the differences between Barack Obama and Donald Trump. I mean, the amount of information in Barack Obama's background that is sealed, not available, restricted, raises all kinds of questions. The amount of questionable ties that senior level people in the Barack Obama administration had, from Valerie Jarrett to Ben Rhodes to John Brennan. You can go down a long list of people who, and I'm no expert on government security, but looking just at the record that's out there, you would say, if turnabout's fair play, if it was okay for the FBI to launch this investigation of Donald Trump, why in the hell wasn't there a similar investigation of Barack Obama and many people in the Obama administration? That's the first question I'd be asking if I'm Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I would be getting out a special set of size 26 steel-toed boots to show up Monday morning, or perhaps have my people show up tonight, to round up the long list of people who were obviously, it would seem to me, way across the line. The FBI is supposed to be an apolitical organization. I think under the Obama administration, maybe before that, the FBI at senior level seems to have changed into an overtly political, partisan organization that was abusing so many different levels of authority in connection with the 2015-16 period and beyond. And you just can't let this behavior happen and go unpunished, because once people at the top levels of an organization like that, and God forbid if it's also true they did this in the CIA and the NSA, once they feel they can do this because politicians come and go, elections come and go, who knows what's really going to happen, we don't really report to anybody, we're above all that. When you let that rot set in, you lose the country. We become East Germany at its worst.
Well, I think East Germany pales in comparison to the capability of the structure you've just described. I do believe that components of the FBI, the CIA, and the NSA are working in conjunction with one another to carry out whatever political goals they may have.
Yeah. So, and it's not like, in this social media age, it's not like people can say anymore, the elite can say anymore, well, the American people can't be trusted to know the truth, and that's reserved for the high altitude, unusual air that we breathe together, at the top of the mountains, where we think about how to make your life better and how to ruin you if you get in our way. That's baloney. I mean, Americans see, and people in Sweden and elsewhere see, volumes of information many times greater per year than has ever been seen before. So we absolutely are owed the right. We shouldn't have to crowdsource the truth. We're paying $6 trillion a year for government in the United States of America. $6 trillion. We deserve to know what really happened in the 15, 16, 17, and 18, now 19 period, the degree to which this FBI may have been corrupted. Why did that happen? Who was pulling the strings? Was the Obama administration aware of this? Who in the Obama administration was aware? If it goes right the way up to Loretta Lynch and Eric Holder and even Barack Obama himself, and before that to Bush,
Absolutely.
I mean, there has to be a reckoning here.
I think it goes way, way back to J. Edgar Hoover setting the standard, and the FBI and the CIA and the NSA operating like this. I mean, we look at the Church Committee hearings. I have only seen photos of George H.W. Bush in the Church Committee hearings, sitting behind William Colby, biting nervously on his glasses, as if to sort of telepathically instruct Colby to STFU. I only saw that photo after H.W. died. I think we're starting to see, it's like they say, when you see one cockroach, there's 1,000 in the walls. We're starting to see a couple cockroaches.
Can I leave now?
What do you mean?
There are thousands of cockroaches in your apartment. I'm out.
Not in mine. I haven't seen a single one in here.
I'm just teasing.
I'm talking about something else.
So in Zero Hedge, in the second link there, Jason, apparently Donald Trump rightly was tweeting up a storm yesterday when this report came out. And, I think I'm glad that Donald Trump frankly tweets. I'm glad that he's bypassing the traditional media. And I think he's, if anything, being too patient with this crew. I mean, I remember during the Obama era, when Mueller was head of the FBI, we would regularly hear, from the people who didn't want investigations into Fast and Furious, didn't want into Benghazi or 9/11 or any of these things, we'd regularly hear pious statements coming out of Mueller's mouth and other people's. You have to understand, Comey's mouth, you have to understand, we have active anti-terrorism investigations ongoing in every State of the Union, involving hundreds and thousands of suspects. You're distracting us from that, with this ridiculous idea of trying to figure out why we might have been allowing illegally manufactured and distributed handguns to leak out of the country to see what might happen and then kill a border. You shouldn't care about that. That's inspired, visionary stuff. Benghazi, would you stop bringing up Libya already? I mean, that was the approach these people had. And Donald Trump, I think he is, a legendary, excuse my language, ass kicker. And he should be going into high gear ass kicking mode here. We see a litany of failure here. We see in James Comey, Billion, I don't know if you noticed this, he tweeted out, I think, in response to some of these Trump tweets, an FDR quote, that I'm very pleased by the caliber of the people who are against me. I'm very pleased to see that Donald Trump, in essence, is mad at me. I'm very proud of that. I mean, James Comey, who the hell does he think he is? I mean, his pension should be canceled. If there should be an investigation into anybody, the one that's going on into Trump, it should be into why did James Comey replace Mueller and miss so many things that happened after Mueller left, to be charitable, including the fact that Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama were attempting, it would seem, their people, to rig the Democratic primaries, then to rig the election, and when that did not work in 2016, to create this resistance. That's something that really needs focus here. And I'm delighted that the president's got his, quote, dander up. And frankly, this is a very interesting long story. We're not going to go into it today in depth, but leave it with you so you can read it at your leisure. That basically what was going on, this blog alleges, is that this is our mutual friend. I mean, I don't know Michael Flynn, but I gather Flynn's been out there. One theory in this article, which to me hangs together well, is that Michael Flynn was not in support of the operation that Hillary and Obama's team were running to get weapons available to the wrong sorts of people, not just in Libya, because the weapons leaked out across the Middle East. And when Michael Flynn went against this operation, he was ejected from the Obama administration, and then when he signed on for the Trump team in a senior position, the Obama team and Clinton team knew, we got to worry about this guy, so we better get him. And I think the more I think about what we know concerning the Flynn case and the Mueller investigation of Flynn, it looks like a total setup to me. Yeah, it looks like a dirty trick. And indeed, this whole Mueller operation, especially with the way it's not like they took 50% neutral, 50% Republican, 50% Democrat, people who were ideally apolitical. No, they put together a hatchet squad of rabidly partisan pro-Hillary, pro-Obama people to go after anybody on the Trump team who might be in a position to get to the bottom of what truly happened when Barack Obama was president. So this is an important story, and I'd encourage people to read it. I hope that finally, even under this Democratic Congress, I hope that the Senate, and particularly the Judiciary Committee, and Donald Trump will decide, you know what, this is a make or break 2-year period here. He might not be reelected. He might not choose to run for reelection in 2020. You don't know yet. That would be bad. At the very least, we must find out what truly the F happened.
Well, it looks like Madam Secretary is mid-sentence at asking what difference does it make anyway. From her point of view, she was about to be president, so what difference does it make anyway? We're going to be sending these guns everywhere.
We're going to destroy evidence. We're going to, ramp up the...
Benghazi is not going away no matter what she says.
That's right.
So we see that the Benghazi question and the treason that people are accusing them of for what they did, with respect to American citizens exposed to incredible violence and even torture due to their negligence. And we don't know if it's negligence or it is deliberate. So I don't think this will go away. I don't think this can be forgotten. And it is probably related to Flynn because he was probably informed of the arms deals that Clinton was doing and preparing for before attacking even Libya, already in Afghanistan. Because this particular article is describing the kind of missiles that were used in Afghanistan as they were tested. And they are the kind of new generation of missiles that are produced and manufactured only in the United States. So there was no other way, there was no explanation that it's like Russian arms or Russian weapons. No, it was American weapons that were tested there, and they were prepared, according to the article. Yeah. They were prepared to
You raise an excellent point, Biljana, and you know, we're going to be starting tomorrow, only on Patreon, a new show with James and Joanne Moriarty, two Americans who were firsthand witnesses to what went on in Libya. And as they've been talking about it, they have been attacked economically, their computers, their communications, their website, all this standard stuff. They've had DIA officials, FBI officials question them at their home. They've had their car broken into at the John B. Wells event at the, what was it called? Operation Classified in Dallas. So there's still a lot of people in the government, in this steady state, deep state, whatever we want to call it, who don't want people to find out about what went on in Benghazi. Donald Trump definitely is a wrench in the works, and although he's not perfect, he definitely seems to be fighting against those that deliberately caused these crazy wars all over the place in the Middle East.
Right, and if you hit this Judicial Watch link, thankfully Tom Fitton and his team are relentless, and they are making progress, I think, in getting more information. They're forcing disclosure finally. For the life of me, what I do not understand is, again, why Donald Trump's Justice Department would be resisting Judicial Watch. I don't get that. And we have coming up in this week, I believe, is it Robert Barr? What's the guy's name?
William Barr.
William Barr, yeah. The person who has been nominated to become the full-time Attorney General, replacing the acting Attorney General, Whitaker.
Why did he just go with Whitaker? I don't want a George H.W. Bush Attorney General.
I don't know why, but let's hope this guy gets across the line, and let's hope that there are a new set of instructions. None of this Rosenstein resistance. Let's get to the bottom of what actually happened in the Clinton Foundation investigation that supposedly began in January of 2016. Let's get to the bottom of the Benghazi mess. Let's get to the bottom of a lot of things. And let's get to the bottom of why it was that Rosenstein would fight so fiercely against declassifying the Pfizer warrant materials, which I think should have been in the public domain a long time ago.
Well, Charles, one thing we forgot to speak about on Wednesday was that this Kiss the Cook image is finally appropriate. It looks like it's time to stick a fork in Rod Rosenstein because he does appear to be done. What do we know about his departure from the DOJ, the timing of it? Why has he been so silent, and now he's announced that he's retiring or resigning? What is going on with Rosenstein?
Well, the official story is that this was long planned. When he took the job, he only wanted to work for 2 years in the job, is the official story that this trying to leak out here. I don't believe that. Rod Rosenstein, prior to being the Deputy Attorney General of the United States, had been a U.S. Attorney in Maryland for a long time. I believe he started in around 2005, August of 2005 or thereabouts. So he's a long-time public servant, and this Deputy Attorney General role is a very powerful position.
I wanted Biljana to be able to see he's done.
Yeah.
Thank you. I had not seen it before.
That's one hot dog I won't be eating, but I think it's good news, though, that Tom Fitton is making progress. And again, I would encourage Donald Trump to have whoever is the top person who could look at this, say, what in the hell is taking so long? How could it be the Department of Justice still has people halfway through almost a Trump tenure in his first term? How can the Department of Justice still be a hotbed of resistance to doing the people's business here. Donald Trump wasn't elected in 2016 because the American population was happy with the level of corruption in the swamp. One of the main reasons he was elected is, I think, that people across the political spectrum, Bernieites as well as people on the right, they looked at the swamp and they said, enough. The swamp needs to be drained. So let's get to that. Yeah. As part of that, we have, I gather, Biljana, you've now been in touch with Katerina Blinova at
yes.
Sputnik, who's a wonderful human being.
Yeah, she is, really.
I
don't know her personally. She just asked me questions.
Yeah. You know, this is a recent interview we did together. She's done, I think we've done almost 70 of these interviews.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, and it's a formula somewhat like the shows here with Jason. What she does is she sends me questions. I think that's probably what she did with you. I always file back with attempted answers, and she then takes my attempted answers and weaves a story like this together with a lot more information in it than what I simply provided. So she's very good at that. And you know, I marvel at the fact that I don't even know whether English is her second language. I think, you know, like you, Biljana, she speaks many languages. She's actually Katya. She likes to be called Katya. Is an historian with a keen interest in the medieval period and earlier.
I didn't know that. Okay, yeah.
And she's independent. She's not on the news team at Sputnik. So these are her opinions our opinions.
Okay, These are her pieces, yeah.
And so it's quite interesting the speed with which she turns the answers into an article like this. But
incredible. So fast.
Yeah,
incredible.
The thrust of this article, though, is, and we've talked about this Jim Kim guy in the past. We've done shows on Korea. And I think it is well past time for people to go back over Mr. Kim's ground, his whole life story, from soup to nuts, how he ended up in the various positions. How could he have risen as far and as fast as he did when he was so intimately involved in the diabolical period, 2003 and forward, when the Clinton Foundation had no right whatsoever, lawful or otherwise, to access with government funds and donated funds adulterated HIV/AIDS medicines and ship them around the world. The person who was on point checking whether this made sense or not was Jim Kim in 2004.
Really?
Yeah. And he then he was in a senior role at the World Health Organization. He then went to Dartmouth as president of Dartmouth. There were big questions. There's a great researcher named Corey who's done work on this. While Kim was at Dartmouth, there were substantial problems that have not been fully exposed yet that he must have known about. He was president of the university. And he goes from there to the World Bank. And my personal experience with the World Bank is extensive, dated but extensive rather. And I think the World Bank is an institution that needs to be fundamentally reformed. There's excess capacity in the banking industry around the world. There are too few good projects that make any sense. There's too much stupid money that's sourced in the name of taxpayers, is not regulated, it's food for graft. And I actually question the need for an institution like the World Bank unless it is rigorously put under the thumb of some regulator or another. Now, unfortunately, the way the World Bank is set up, it's not really under the scrutiny of any empowered regulator. It's out there, it's a vast enterprise. They can hire PR people, they can hire, foundations or whatever to sing their praises. But when it comes time to see, how much money they may have been wasting, how much money may have gone into graft and corruption, it's woefully ineffective in my view.
Charles, what does the World Bank have to do with the G20?
They're very different things. So G20 is, my understanding, is just it's a gathering of the 20, in theory, most significant economies, the leaders of those countries, and they have a series of meetings in different periods of the year over time. Then there's the I forget if it's now the 8 or 7. That's the biggest countries, and then there are other such associations. But all of these loose associations where people get together and they meet, and they tend never to be in Detroit or West Hartford or East Hartford or something like that. They're always in, Paris or Geneva or Singapore, and the catering services are, going.
You don't think Detroit is nice this time of year?
yeah, it's wonderful.
I ask about the G20 because I did this video with Ole Damagard yesterday about the installation of this artwork down at the World Trade Center, which is called Candy Nations or Nations of Candy or something like that, and it features the G20 participants, including Saudi Arabia, which many people in New York and survivors of 9/11 felt was pretty distasteful to have this Saudi Arabian artwork right there, where allegedly Saudi Arabian hijackers were used. A lot of people doubt that story, but certainly the 28 pages of Bob Graham's Senate Intelligence Committee report tells us that Saudi Arabia at least participated in the financing and planning of 9/11, and so, we've got that statement on the Saudi Arabian flag that is just so objectionable to so many people, given what happened there. It just seems like they're really taunting us by putting that in everybody's face, and then you've got South Korea right next to it. So it was interesting.
Well, in this one, you have the picture of Ole. Isn't he? Is it me, or does he look like Christopher Walken?
A little bit.
Yeah.
Ole.
Guy's everywhere, that Walken.
He is. He said, why would you do that to your own World Trade Center?
So, in terms of this, this is pretty funny. This is a clip, I don't know if we could play it, that the theory is that they're trying to manufacture, the crisis they're trying to manufacture in the mainstream media is that Donald Trump, nobody likes the fact that Donald Trump has shut the government down, and he's an idiot, and it's, the longer the government stays closed, the less negotiating power Donald Trump will have. And apparently in this clip, which people can watch at home or whatever themselves, this guy, Donny Deutsch, who is just insufferable.
Why is he on the news? Isn't he just an advertising executive?
He sold his father. His father had an advertising business, and he sold it for a lot of money. He's worth hundreds of millions.
He's winning here.
This guy's also about 77 as well. He doesn't look 77 years old, and he just
Donny
loses.
Deutsch is 77.
Yeah.
That guy right there is 77.
Yeah.
Wow, he's in good shape.
But he just the way these type of people argue, and maybe Biljana, you have to deal with this in Sweden. But they come at it from the standpoint, they'll sit down and they'll say, I don't know why I'm wasting my time explaining this to you idiots. Donald Trump, he's a moron. He's demented. On and on and on and on. Excuse me, did you run for president of the United States and win? I mean, for a demented person, Donald Trump managed to be pretty successful for a lot of years, Donnie.
Well, this is what they do. This is the argument that is used here or in the States or anywhere when you have no other good arguments.
Right.
So what you do is personal attacks, abuse, insults. That's all there is left, because there is no other arguments.
Right.
So once they do that, I know they have lost the argument. So I could just say bye-bye.
Exactly.
And then you have nothing to tell me. There is nothing interesting for us to discuss. So it's the same procedure here, absolutely the same procedure here.
Well, we inserted this next one for you, Biljana, in particular. This story from the New York Post is hysterical. This is a story, a revelation that there was an earlier story about research that apparently seemed to blame the spreading of viral news on low attention spans of the modern human. And it turns out this got a tremendous amount of play because it was, that makes sense. People have short attention spans. That's why viral fake news spreads. Well, it turns out, upon closer reflection, that the research study is wrong.
Yeah.
And the people
fake research.
The fake research. So we got fake news and we got fake research. And this squares actually with, there's an actual study that somebody had done that something like a third of all peer-reviewed research, and I forget if it was just hard science or whether it was broad peer, but a third is completely invented.
Yes.
It's 1/3. I mean, you're sitting there.
Incredible number, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, your resume is very impressive, Biljana, with all the studies that you've written, and I would guess they're all true. But imagine, to
Yes.
get something in a peer-reviewed journal is not so easy. So how could these, these eggheads who are peer reviewing all this stuff, how could they get a third wrong? I mean, that's like a passing grade in this country, 65. I mean,
I review for, I work as a reviewer for journals, like science journals and magazines. It is possible that this could happen because it is up to us, to each one of us, to our consciousness. I'm not controlled by anybody. I'm doing this for free. It's a pro bono work we do. That we don't have to do it. It's just part of us loving our science and being responsible for our field. So this is how I reason about it. That's how I do it. So I do very detailed, usually check of what this person has written before, and if there are data, what kind of data are presented. And one of the my typical comments, not only for master level thesis and journals that are published in international articles that are published in international journals, is that there are no raw data. So I'm getting only the percentage results or analysis of results, but I'm not getting the raw data. So there is no way for me as a reviewer to check the authenticity, correctness of the statistics that is presented and presented to be published, if I don't have the raw data. I have to fight for this. For so many times as a reviewer, I have to say there are no raw data. Not only this, I'm getting from people with PhD theses, I'm getting papers such as results on number of studies that have no definition of the major concepts. How can you at all do any kind of study without a very thorough definition? Or without having a zero hypothesis. In social sciences, I actually have to say I really side with Popper, who said that in social sciences, why are they called social science? Why are they called sciences at all? Because you cannot be looking for something that you want to prove. You have to look for evidence against your expectation, not for evidence that proves your expectation. If you look for evidence that proves your expectation, you will find it.
Yeah,
in
just
the social
confirmation
world,
bias, right?
Confirmation, you will find it. This is not science.
Yeah.
So I have to say that I'm not surprised.
One thing to keep in mind in the case of this New York Post article is that anyone who is a peer of an idiot would themselves also be an idiot by the very definition of the word peer. So I think we can understand how this happens.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I haven't really met idiots in this field, but
I meet a lot of them.
But there is a lot of ambition. I think there is a lot of prestige orientation and ambition rather than actual dedication, love, and interest and curiosity for the field, or even a responsibility for the future generations and the science as such, or understanding the nature of our lives on this universe.
So we'll finish off this page quickly because then we want to get into the meat of both of your slides, Biljana, and some quick math.
Yeah.
But this is a story here in Zero Hedge that I think, Jason, you're going to want to study carefully. There is evidence, more pernicious evidence, that there's this new entity that's going hell-bent to leather to destroy entities like Crowdsource the Truth and the alternative media. And this is where I think it's called NewsGuard.
Oh, I've heard about that, yeah.
So now you're going to have this filter where you try to go to a site and then NewsGuard will say, hang on, watch it, caution.
I wonder if that's what's happening right now.
Could be. Could be.
NewsGuard.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
Sounds very Orwellian.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, they don't like borders, but they like guards.
Exactly.
How about an open society? Why do you need guards?
Yeah.
For information, at least.
That's something to keep our eye on for sure.
And then we have this. I don't know if you saw this thing that AOC did to Joe Lieberman. Did you see that story, Jason and Biljana? So basically, Joe Lieberman made some negative comments. Joe is a centrist Democrat who was, I think, the vice presidential nominee.
That's Jew-on-Jew violence, Charles. Wasn't Ocasio Cortez Jewish last week? 2 weeks ago?
Was she really?
Something like that. She went to a synagogue and said she was actually Jewish.
So here, Lieberman made some negative comments saying she's not the future of the House. And she responded by basically mocking his age. And I think, it's one thing, if you're Roger Federer at age 29 and you've won a large number of Grand Slam tennis championships and some 76-year-old tennis player wants to make a comment about your game, maybe you could stand up and take on, let's say, I don't know how old Rod Laver is these days, maybe you can say something, to Rod Laver that's chippy, right? But this is, Ocasio-Cortez has won one primary, and that catapulted her into the House. She give her credit for taking on Joe Crowley and winning that primary contest, but she is in a safe Democratic seat in the House. As far as I can tell, she can barely tie her shoes. And Joe Lieberman, in contrast, has been around, was the Democratic candidate for Vice President of the United States. He had a distinguished career in the Senate. He is thought to be fair-minded on the right and the left. He is not anybody, he's not a hack or enthralled to anybody. Indeed, he was somebody who really read Bill Clinton, one of the few people who read Bill Clinton, the Riot Act, during the whole Monica Lewinsky period. He was one of the very few Democrats who stood up and said, hang on, what you're doing here is dead wrong, Bill. And so for this AOC to make fun of somebody's age. I think, in fact, not just because I'm getting older, but I think that people who have only been in positions of responsibility for less than several months.
But how is this mocking his age, though?
That's apparently what this is. What you're supposed to say if you're hip. Who dis is you're supposed to know that's if you're a millennial or whatever.
I don't think that's mocking his age. Who's reporting this here? Daily Mail?
Daily Mail, but no, there's a lot more to the story.
I mean, she's a dope. That gets no argument from me. Although she does have excellent teeth and gums. Look at that. On display right there.
There you go. And so last but not least, Biljana, we have this to look forward to, and I think it's February 7th. There's a major announcement. Avenatti, that crazy lawyer, and Stormy Daniels are going to attend the congressional hearing where Michael Cohen is going to testify before Congress. So that, that's has nothing to do with them trying to draw attention to themselves. I mean, that's not why they would do this, right? So I refer to this as old nudes.
Why? Yeah, what are they doing there?
And I thought they disliked one another. I thought.
Well, this picture makes me wonder how she paid her legal bill.
That's mean, Jason.
That's the barter system, Charles.
That's mean. So if we go then to the next page, next slide, we'll pick the pace of this. We're not going to even go through each of these links, but this is to let people understand that we have been on the case of Sweden for some time, not just Biljana and me and Jason, but John Solomon has done some excellent work questioning why the Clinton Foundation would have had a conduit feeder operation in Sweden. Why did they choose Sweden of all places to raise money? When did that stuff happen? Well, the answer is, we'll show you it happened when Hillary was Secretary of State. Why would it have made sense for a Swedish firm like Ericsson to contribute money to the Clinton orbit? Well, if they're trying
Eric Hansen.
Exactly.
I don't think that's a coincidence.
No, but Ericsson, the telecom firm, was very interested in getting on the right side of, or encouraging the United States not to make an issue of Ericsson's business in Iran. And so there was a long-standing set of highly suspicious relationships involving the Clintons, where the Clintons get paid either directly for speeches or indirectly through their foundation. And there are multinational Swedish business interests. Sweden, as you rightly point out, Biljana, is a country that has a small internal market. It has quite a few world-beating gigantic corporations who need to export. Therefore, they need to be on the right side of the United States in certain key markets. They don't want to be sanctioned. And there are multiple people have done excellent work about raising these questions about what the hell was really going on in Sweden. And obviously we appreciate, Biljana, your focus on this as well. Several of these links are of our previous interviews with you. And recently though, Jason, if you pull up this link here, this gives you a sense. This is a long story, and again, this is something to read at people's leisure. It gives you a sense of just how aggressive Lisa Page was in her tenure when she was involved, before she was kicked out of the whole Mueller investigation. When top-level people in the FBI and Department of Justice want to seriously go after you, they have enormous resources at their disposal. And I bring this up in contrast to say, we're finally perhaps finding out what was really going on in Spygate. That's the recent period. Why hasn't the same level of focus gone into just exactly what favors Lucas Lundin, a person of Swedish extraction, was calling in the United States government, either when Hillary was senator or later when she was Secretary of State and a presidential aspirant? What kind of favors was Lucas Lundin or were his colleagues calling in to try to get advantages in mining deals across the continent of Africa, where they're very much involved?
Well,
what
mining,
kind of favor? Yeah,
look who's right here.
Exactly. Yeah, and what kind of favors were the various Swedish clients who'd given money to the Clinton Foundation, and exactly how did that solicitation happen? What paperwork was filed in Sweden? Who are these real donors? Why did they decide to route money through Sweden into the Clinton Foundation? You could send it directly. There's no real reason to send. And if you're thinking about overhead, I mean, Sweden is not the most inexpensive country in the world to operate a charity. So why would you set up a new subsidiary in Sweden? Why would you go through this trouble? How many people, how were the people selected who would go to these charity events? How much did they pay for the privilege of being in a room with Bill Clinton or the minions of the Clinton Foundation? And what specific advantages did Bill Clinton, his family, the investment firms, the law firms, the accounting firms that were around this mess, what sort of benefits did they derive from this exercise? And how could we say that the Clinton Foundation in Sweden had the authority, which it claimed to have in Sweden, to go after all these causes that they claimed to be interested in, when the main foundation that controls everything in the United States had no such authority? So, are there laws in Sweden about...
That's the magic of Sweden, Joe.
Yeah, you just go there and say, hey, my charity is supposed to be a charity and be a library and a research center on Little Rock, which is why I'm here in Sweden.
Yes.
Wait a minute. Sweden is not Arkansas as far, maybe it's becoming Arkansas, but, So I just put this up for background for people who have not yet read or watched some of these videos about Sweden. Here's a quick shortcut to understand why we're so concerned about it. If we then go into the next page, Jason, I'm going to fly through these numbers because I know people are not necessarily wild about numbers. But what we've done here, when we think about, economists can make it sound really complicated. Gross domestic product, this statistic, that statistic. The simple way to think about economics is it's about what you buy as a person or a household. What do you buy each year to live, to pay for your rent or mortgage, to eat, pay for health care? That's called consumption, right?
Mm.
That's what you buy. And there's typically, most people...
Nothing to do with tuberculosis.
No, it has nothing to do with it. Just, let's bring it right back here.
Sorry.
That's okay. So it's what you go out, when you go to the supermarket. Very few people go to the supermarket unless they probably are buying for a government agency and, say, all right, where's the caviar aisle? Just charge me extra on caviar. I'll have a whole bunch of caviar. I'll buy far more than I can eat in a month, because it's not my money. And then they'll go over here to buy the most expensive liquor and this and that. That's not the way people shop for products and services in the main. People are careful. People, actually the rich people are more careful, frankly, than often the poor people. But the thing we're talking about here in consumption, if we look at the trend back on the slide, Jason.
Just showing everybody how George H.W. Bush goes to the supermarket.
And there you see GE Energy.
Where is that?
GE Energy.
Oh my God, isn't that so weird?
That is weird. Let's go back into the...
But see, sometimes my ADD brings up interesting coincidences.
Right. So what we've done here, these are the figures for Sweden, okay? And this is the sum total of what the Swedish population bought, translated from Swedish kroner to US dollars. These are US dollars. This is actually billions of dollars. So in 2007, the entire Swedish population spent 216 billion. There were 9.2 million people. They spent $23,610 per person in Sweden on everything. So that's $2,000 a month. Okay, that's the average across the whole country. So rich people will spend more, poor people may spend less.
That's rent, food, everything?
Yeah, pretty much everything for living. And the issue here is that most people, in America, most people do not have any true financial net worth, and by that I mean financial assets greater than their debt, including their mortgage, right? People will have a net worth, but a lot of times it's not a true net positive financial net worth. And I would venture to guess that in Sweden it's the same, that when you think about what's really going to float your boat in a year, it's how much you spend to live. Do you have more money coming in after tax to pay your living costs, yes or no? Or are you living paycheck to paycheck and borrowing to finance the difference? So one measure of whether you're doing well or not doing well is whether this consumption per capita number is growing. And this is not adjusted for inflation here. This is just looking at dollars of the day. In Sweden, in 2007, people spent $2,000 a month. And if we go down to the bottom, Jason, you see that 9 years later, 10 years later, same deal. And there's been inflation in Sweden, inflation around the world. So when you look at this, and I'm not saying that you should live your life to consume as much as possible. I'm not saying that by any stretch of the imagination. I'm just saying if you're looking for a simple measure of whether people are better or worse off over a long period of time, here you see in Sweden that consumption is basically down, right? That is not progress. That is not progress at all. This is measuring the total sum of money spent. It's not trying to adjust it for inflation. It's not trying to be really fancy. It's doing a very top-down approach. And the reason we're doing this is we're now going to compare Sweden, which apparently AOC and Nancy Pelosi think is a country that the United States should emulate, with Venezuela, which I'm pleased to report in the last several hours that the United States government has officially announced that we will not recognize the election of Maduro, who was reelected in a fake election, according to us, as the leader of Venezuela. So tensions in Venezuela with the United States are only rising. So you look at this, that's $2,000 a month in the great country of Sweden. Let's go to the next page and we'll look at Venezuela. All right, now Venezuela actually at surface level, they've doubled their consumption per capita, more than doubled, from 4,300, which is, what is that? That's $350 a month, right? We said Sweden is 2,000 a month.
Wow.
Okay, Venezuela is only $350 up to like $800 a month, call it.
Nice
in 2016. So yeah, the growth rate went up, and I'm sure Ocasio Cortez would say, look, Venezuela's growth rate's fantastic. It's much better than the United States. It's on a pimple. It's on a small amount of money. And even with all the growth, Venezuelan populations, across the whole population, is spending less than half of what the Swedes spend per capita to live. And I don't think that's because they're so economical and things cost a lot less in Venezuela. I don't think that's the case at all.
I think they got hyperinflation.
Yeah. So this is, again, these are the two countries that Ocasio-Cortez and Pelosi cites to us as this is what we should really try to emulate. Well, let's take a look at the United States of America and the same data. All right. Notice that, first of all, the United States is a much bigger country. It's easier to try to manage a country of 9 million or 20-odd million people. We're over 300 million people. And frankly, the larger you get, the more territory you have, the tougher the degree of difficulty of actually providing law and order and defending a country as rich as ours from all enemies, foreign and domestic. But the size of our market, look at the size of this market. It went from $9.8 trillion, that's what we buy in this country, up to $12.9 trillion, okay? And that means our spending went from $32,000 for everybody, babies, retired people, children in school, $32,000 a person is what we spend.
Those babies are making it rain, Charles.
Up to 40.
Including healthcare expenses.
Yeah, this includes healthcare. Well, I think the accounting is a little bit complicated. I think that the cost of insurance, and sort of like social insurance, is basically an amount that comes before consumption. So you take pre-tax income, you take your taxes. This is what after-tax spending here. Okay, this is the amount of money that you spend directly on some medical purchases. Mm-hmm. The biggest element of it is on living, on home costs, whether rent or mortgage. But we look at this. The big points for me are, this doesn't seem to be all that bad. I mean, you see a growth trend. You see one down year, 2009. It's only down 1%. You know, it's pretty amazing that our large economy was as resilient as it is. And then you think about, take a big step back from these numbers and say, all right, there are many Americans who fight to figure out, no, you can't have that extra, meal out. No, you can't have that bottle of scotch, or you can't have that skirt or that pair of pants or whatever. People are fighting to spend money. The amount of money that we spend is only $12.9 trillion. In contrast, the U.S. government, federal, state, and local, spends over $6 trillion, and nobody knows where it goes, right? I mean, there's something very badly wrong with that picture. That's a simplistic way I look at it. I don't need some 29-year-old know-it-all who has no relevant experience telling me, that the private sector should send more money to her and to Washington, D.C. so they could, burn it.
Yeah.
I think we need the same level of disruption that happens in the private sector and has happened since 1989, needs to happen to government. Government should be able to do a lot more with less money, given the advances in technology.
Well, and not only that, I think there's tons of areas of waste, theft, graft, all that if we clamp down on, and let's not even talk about straight theft, but the revolving door of all these people going into private industries that then become contractors to the government, I think it sort of reeks of those people knowing exactly how to take advantage of their former agencies by creating companies like CrowdStrike or whatever it might be to carry out these functions that maybe the FBI can't exactly legally do, or give them some kind of legal out where they can cozy up to their buddy James Comey and conduct an investigation of a DNC server and make a lot of money and not even deliver a good investigation.
I agree. So one final slide before we get to Biljana's. This is making it easy for people who don't like numbers. I'm now comparing, what is Sweden's consumption per capita as a percent of the U.S.? What is Venezuela's as a percent of the U.S.? And you see, Sweden went from 73% of the U.S. level in 2007 to 59%. In other words, the consumption growth rate was negative compared to the United States. And in Venezuela, it went up. It was 13% of the U.S. rate. Now it's 24%. This is, mind you, 2016 data. We don't have the impact of sanctions in 17 and 18. So 17 and 18 in Venezuela numbers are going to be horrible. But I look at this and I don't see an argument here why we should fundamentally reform the U.S. system to emulate Sweden or emulate Venezuela because some nitwit who likes to dance on a bar has decided, on the strength of a couple weeks' work in Congress, that we ought to raise income tax rates to 70% and spend $30-odd trillion on ridiculous projects that we don't have the money for. I mean, I don't even want to, if I were in Washington, D.C. as a Democrat, I'd be saying, in leadership to this person, I'd be saying, listen, you're lucky at age 29 to be in Congress. Why don't you go over here, learn the job, stop this grandstanding. Every time you grandstand and you push the debate as far left as you're pushing it, you're lessening our chances of winning in 2020. Because even today, Ocasio Cortez is very popular in, hip New York City. But this is not an American heartland school of thought. And in some ways, it's a gift to the Republicans and the conservatives that this person is gaining. She has a bigger and more powerful Twitter following than many of the established Democratic politicians. And so they should be thinking, we're talking about taking Donald Trump's Twitter away from him. They should be thinking about taking her Twitter away, because it's not going to end up helping Democrats, and it's certainly not going to help, big spending, crony socialist loving, unregulated globalist promoting type of people. So
why should they remove anybody's Twitter account? Everybody should be able to speak whatever they can say, and then it's up to us to have a better argument.
Yeah,
you're right.
I would not shut anybody down. I would like people to have an opportunity to have good arguments, or to at least ask for good arguments. If they are rude or something like that, we can take care of it. But why should anybody take away other people's Twitter accounts or any other accounts?
You just tweet at her, who dis?
Yeah, well, it is interesting. I hadn't seen this chart before. I don't know if you could see it, Biljana, on the screen. But this is amazing that she would have 11.8 million retweets and likes compared to Donald Trump's 39.8.
Look at the New York Times. She's 10x New York Times almost.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
She's 12x
I mean,
Reuters.
you don't really know what kind of accounts they are, and you don't really know what's going on there, and the fact that she has many. But what's important is that she actually succeeded to get a seat, to get power.
I question the whole narrative.
Her ideas. I mean, it's good to take it seriously in the sense that the same stories repeated every generation. Every generation goes through the same procedure, so to say. You want to for example, my own son is more like her, and
is he constantly saying stupid stuff?
No, I think it is. No, he's actually very smart. No, it is his social view of generosity towards others and sharing resources with others. And the reason why this is happening is because whenever you have sort of conservative societies that have built up wealth and welfare and good, warm life, you come to a point in which the next generation is actually living only in these conditions. They are not used to sacrifice. They're not used to this discipline that the previous generation has to go through. They are not used to scarcity. So the generations that conservative ideologies produce are always liberal. So then you have liberal and leftist views, which we see now, and I see it more as a result of the wealth and the success of the previous generations. That's what we see here. And then these people that grew up in actual wealth, and as your one of your views called and said, well, Sweden is very wealthy. Yes, it's very wealthy, and that's why people get wealth taken for granted, and sharing of resources taken for granted.
Biljana, a lot of our viewers are doubting the authenticity of these Twitter followers. Tony on YouTube, for instance, says fake Twitter followers equals Soros and his billions, buys a lot of fake people tweeting.
I'm sure there are fake Twitter
Doc Cigar says AOC likes big bots and she cannot lie.
That's funny.
Biljana, your slides did not come through on the attachment on the email. Could you send that again real quick before we begin with your slides? Yeah, I mean, maybe this is more interference. We could, if David Hawkins were with us, he would suggest that somewhere between Sweden and New York, there's been a man-in-the-middle attack, or perhaps they just didn't attach.
Oh, that's strange, because I saw them attached. I'm sending a PDF now.
Okay.
I sent you before kinds of files. anyway, this will be an update. The last time I think we saw each other was during the election. I don't think we've talked after the election. So
Oh yeah,
I'm
no.
going to
When I
update
was
you
in
a little bit
Sweden,
of
it
the
had just
results.
ended. Remember, you told me when we were at your home, you told me that you were confused on the appearance on election night because the website went down.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was the last time we spoke. Was after that.
Oh yes, you were. Yeah, you came.
With
Yes,
Charlie.
exactly. Yes, yes. Um, Here, I send you the PDF now again.
Yeah. Well, why don't we start talking while I wait
Did
for
you
it to
get
arrive? Not yet. I'm still waiting. I mean,
That's
this
strange.
computer is
Are you
under
on
some
another,
kind of
on
attack
another
right here.
planet, or?
Well, I don't know what's going on. This is a very fast computer and a very fast internet connection, and people have offered me lots of suggestions as to why it might be going slowly, but there is no video processing going on the computer right now. There's no other programs running than what I
If I
normally
send it to
have.
you on Skype?
Let's see. It's just arrived here. It says loading.
Okay.
So we can chat while we wait for that to arrive.
Yes. So my view on the phenomena of the success of these extreme leftists in the United States, the mood of the young people in Sweden also for me is a result of the wealth. The more wealthy the society you come from, um, yeah, the more easy it is for take it for given and to be used to it. On the other hand, I am interested in a society that is generous and there is care for those that need. But as you want to, she gave an example of Sweden, we have a total burden of taxes of 70%, and when you're paying 70% and your child is gang raped by foreign migrants that you have no say about. I read a case where a little girl was raped by 6 migrants. And that's so tragic that I have to say, who cares about the money? It's not about the money anymore. It's about survival. And when you have given your 70%, whether you're paying that as direct taxes or municipality taxes, county taxes, state taxes, VAT taxes, all other kinds of taxes, when you've done that, and at the same time you have no say over the life of your own family and your own children, you start to think, okay, there's something wrong with that system. So in general, I think that any system that relies so heavily on a big state with big capacity to control us is anti-human at a certain point, as it is now in Sweden. So you could very well have a very nice sofa and you can have a wonderful apartment and it's very warm and nice, and you have a paycheck and you have a security that you will never really die of hunger. Let's say this is the case, but your child is raped and you have no say and you are beaten by whoever entered in your home and wanted to steal something from it. And at the same time, you are then sued by the state because you, let's say, you try to stop invaders, burglars, or whoever tried to rape your child, for instance. This is something that is happening in Sweden. A father was sentenced for 4 to 5 years in prison for protecting his own son in their own home from burglars. And so not only economically, but humanely, this kind of system is a disaster. You have no control and over your own life, over the life of your own children, and you're not sovereign anymore. The Swedish model existed and succeeded because it was a very small society. Today it is 10 million, but imagine probably in the 700s, 700s it was much less, or in the 1700s it was probably 1 million, and now it's 10 million. This is very little numbers altogether. So you compare Sweden to the United States is practically impossible because you have 10 million population and a huge, huge country with lots of resources. And the system here succeeded because it was based on trust. You have a small community, people know each other. It's very easy to control a community when people actually have common control of each other through the community. Okay. Someone knows someone else, their relatives or something like that. So it is a very different situation, and it's very hard to compare that way. And nothing of that scale of welfare that we have in Sweden would succeed in a society that is not based on trust.
Now, Biljana,
and this trust is lost here.
Yes. Speaking of trust, I've still been unable to download your slides here on my computer, but through a variety of creative processes that I will not reveal, I have the slides now. Very, very strange how difficult it was to get right now.
I sent it to you on Skype too. Yes, you can go to the next slide. We're already there. I will start with what I ended last time. If you remember, Charles and Jason, I ended with the picture of the girl who was killed during the terrorist attack in April 2017. And her name is Ebba. She was just walking home, and her body was cut in 2 pieces. The person who attacked her was an Islamic terrorist. He saw himself as such. He acted on behalf of ISIS. He said it himself. He wanted to kill as many Swedes as possible. So her body was parted in 2. She was smashed and parted in 2. And I've shown horrible pictures of that. But now her grave has been desecrated and destroyed a number of times. More than 11 times by now. We are counting them. And as the news arrived, we are counting it. And her father, is devastated. He goes and tries to fix the grave, and the grave is again and again destroyed. And everybody knows who is doing it. Is a migrant. This migrant should not be in Sweden. He is to be deported. But as there are no actual physical deportations, there are decisions for deportation, but there are no actual deportation, he's still there, and he regularly goes to the grave and destroys it. He even attacks her father. The police is helpless. They cannot do anything about it. No one is able to do anything about this. The body of a child, a completely innocent child, is, even in the grave, is desecrated regularly since last year, and no one can do anything about it. This is, for me, a metaphor for the situation in Sweden.
Wow. Horrible.
Yes, it is horrible. And as you can see, strange enough, we had an election, and people, I have to say, before I thought people were not naive, they understand the situation, we see what's going on, but I actually start to think that there is indeed a lot of naivety. People still believe that the parties are what they say they represent. And we already have seen that there's an extremely violent migration, and no normal mind can support this kind of violence in quality and quantity. So we should have lost for a long time ago a trust in the political structures that are supporting this kind of migration. However, whoever has been against the violence and decrying the violence has been in one or another way attacked, symbolically assassinated, and called, labeled a Nazi or a right extremist. So they continue and continue with the same completely false labeling. You cannot call a National Socialist right wing and not even far right wing, because this is National Socialism. National Socialism is extreme form of leftist ideology. Left wing ideology is far left ideology, is not far right ideology. So creating this completely artificial attitude against conservative views through simple manipulation of semantics, lying with words, is repeated in all media, not only Swedish media, international media, and the results which we followed together last time, as you can see, are such that the big parties have to cooperate with other parties in order to get 51% in the government, in the parliament. But also you have level of municipality and you have the level of county, not only on the level of the government and the parliament. So the big parties, S stands for Social Democrats. This is what Cortez likes. And they have been ruling for 100 years. As we mentioned before, they lost a lot of their followers this time, but still have the most votes. And I will show you and remind you why they got most votes. And then M stands for moderates. This is supposed to be a right-wing party, but really it's not. So in a sense, of all the parties that you see there is not one party that is actually a conservative party or a right-wing party. All the parties are different forms of leftists and globalists. So the C stands for Center Party, and Center Party is represented by a woman called Annie Lööf, who is a Soros admirer. So from that moment on, I don't have to tell you more about the Center Party, because you can, anything that Soros has said or done in any other country is literally repeated by this person and all the media around her. What is interesting for you to see, and why I think everything was predictable for me before the election and now, is that the Center Party got 8.6%. The Sweden Democrats Party, which is a leftist but anti-immigration party, or I would say not anti-immigration because they are for immigration. They don't want violent immigration, and they want to protect the population in Sweden. So they got 17.5%. And yet, when you look at the distribution of the power seats in the municipality, on municipality level, you see that they have almost the same amount. How is that possible? One is getting 17.5, the other one is getting 8.6. And as you can see, if you follow the column on the bottom, this is for there are many municipalities, so this is per municipality. But look at the last bottom line, which tells you the total number. So the second number, 1,603. This is for the Center Party. The Center Party with the 8.6% is getting 1,603 seats on the municipality level, power seats on the municipality level. And the Sweden Democrats Party that got 17.5, that is 1.1 million people, more than 1.1 million people voted for that party. They got 1,806. So the difference is not very big, despite the fact that it's more than half in numbers. They are still getting quite a lot of control over municipality, and the same thing goes when it comes to the county level, power in the county level. So the county level. So on county level and on municipality level, we already have distribution of power which is comprised by the control of the center party and the Social Democrats and moderates, the biggest parties. What you see here is a reminder from my talk during the election. If you remember the election night, I said that for me, in my view, the globalist plan is to have alliance plus a feminist PM. So she has really tried. You see in red, this is Annie Lööf, representative of the so-called Center Party, has absolutely nothing central about it, is as central as Macron is. So it's extremely globalist party. So this woman tried to become the prime minister in Sweden. She wanted to. She is trying it. She's continuing to try it. Now is the latest attempt where she basically gave up all the so-called liberal and right-wing ideology and views in order to cooperate together with the Social Democrats because they got the most votes. So she kind of betrayed the people in this group that you see. Particularly the man with the glasses is Christensen. He is representing the Moderater, and the one in blue is representing the Christian Democrats. And on the right side, you see represented the Liberal Party. It is only Moderater that got the moderates that got more votes. The others have less votes. So even if they combine with each other all together, they still cannot make a government. They have to cooperate with someone else. So how are they going to do it? This has been the question now for all these months, that they cannot really build a government. So the Center Party had a very fat cat budget, as I said, and Lööf is the Swedish Hillary in a sense. She's acting exactly like that. So she has changed her rhetoric quite a lot. She's become kind of like a general talking to people, that she's taking over. She's deciding what's going to happen. And she's decided that she's fighting. She has a personal fight against the leader of the Sweden Democrats, Åkesson, that you see on the picture. So she has created this narrative together with the media that there is a fight between these two. But in reality, this is not at all how it is, nor how voters see it, because her party is very small. She has very little following, and the Sweden Democrats Party is the most growing party in Sweden. I think that if there is an election now, they're going to get even more votes than they got in September. Now, talking about the Center Party, she's calling herself Center, exactly as Macron was called Center. And none of them is centered. None of them is centrist at all. They are extreme globalists, and they want to basically annihilate the nation state in order to create a federal EU state. And this party was before called Agrarian, now it's called Center, but it's only called Center. So now she has said, because I'm Center Party, the other parties are marginal. So just based on the term, that is a wrong term. It does not really describe to you correctly the ideology of this party. It is not a center. It is trying to regulate and to marginalize others, but it doesn't have a centrist view, exactly as Macron is not a centrist. And now you see on the left side, this is the leader of the Miljöpartiet, the Green Party, let's call it that way, the Environmental Party. And she's definitely having views as Social Democrats, and said that she's going to support anything that Social Democrats do. She participates together with Löfven on the right side, the previous prime minister in Sweden, still prime minister through the temporary government. The same government that we had the past years is staying, and these are the leaders. You see Löfven, Wallström, and Leuven. For me, very interesting is Wallström in the middle. This is when this is a picture taken when the parliament voted no confidence in Leuven. So he's already been voted out, but still having power and acting on it. So they have been voted out. His government has been voted out, including Lövin, Wallström, and Löfven all together. As you can see in the middle, Wallström is quite nervous. She's upset and she's nervous. This is the person that was the biggest supporter of Clinton in Sweden. She has worked with Clinton also in the United Nations. She has been working with the postcode lottery that was giving billions to.
Well, you've spoken to us about that quite a bit, Biljana, the postcode lottery. So I guess they're not loving it now that Hillary's lost.
Lövin, loving it, they're not loving it. You see a picture in which they're not loving it, but they are still keeping power. They are still in power right now. Now you're having a new situation. This is a very new picture from very new kind of latest situation. I'm updating you on it because I think that in the future you're going to listen about these people and I want to hear from them and about them. On the left side you have Hanif Bali. He's a Swedish politician from the Moderate Party. Of Iranian background, as I understand, and his views are very supportive of the ply and the decry of violence in Sweden. He thinks that this is not tolerable and acceptable, although he is not in the Sweden Democrats Party. He sides and protects victims of the new violence that Sweden has experienced, that never experienced before. So he stood up for the woman in the red that is next to him in the picture. And she's actually one of the representatives of the Christian Democrats that is now under very heavy attack. And she has been under attack for quite a while. By the Bonnier group media, especially Dagens Nyheter. It's a newspaper that is supposedly liberal. Now it is, you could call it neoliberal. It is absolutely against the Sweden as it was before. It is every day. It is either about feminism, against the Swedish entity and the Swedish nation or Swedish history, challenging it in all possible ways with fake news, constant assassinations, career assassinations, character assassinations, non-stop fake news. They are dedicated to lie and destroy Trump on daily basis. And
so there's daily conversation about Trump in Sweden?
Yes, Trump. I think Trump's popularity is growing
Really?
because before he was truly hated, mainly because the media here, all the media were bashing Trump nonstop. So people had absolutely no idea who Trump is and what he's doing and what's going on, and they are in shock why he won. And the reason why they are in shock is because they are lied to all the time.
What was the reaction, Biljana, when Trump made that statement? He said, look what happened in Sweden last night. Here in the United States, everybody said, oh, what is Trump talking about? What did people in Sweden say when he said that? He was bringing attention to the crime and violence that's happening in Sweden.
This is the only head of a state that ever said anything on behalf of the victims of this sadistic violence in Sweden. So I am eternally grateful to him for doing it, because he helped us a lot. At that time, this violence was covered up no one talked about it. And as you know, my story, I retweeted the site Gang Rape Sweden with statistics on it. And my entire position was removed as an associate professor. I was persecuted in every university by groups of people who are related actually to open democracy, which is supported by Cyrus. Anyway, I wanted to look again, please, at the picture that I was showing.
Sure.
Can we go back to it? Yeah, the woman in the middle is now heavily attacked by the newspaper called Dagens Nyheter, which is Bonnier Media. And she is part of the Sweden Democrats, and she actually, without being the head of her party, she actually managed, together with many others, not only her, but many others in her party, to stop an agreement that was made some time ago. And that agreement would support an immediate buildup of a new government directly after the election with the Green Party and the Social Democrats. This did not happen now, and this process of a negotiation for all these months and opportunity for finding out what's going on in the Swedish political world is thanks to the fact that that agreement was cancelled. And it was cancelled not only with her efforts, but also others' efforts in the Christian Democrats. Therefore, she's very heavily attacked right now, as she is very critical to the woman to the right, the Annie Lööf, who is representative of the Center Party. She's now trying to get a cross-block parliamentary agreement, which is of similar character. So she's betraying her voters, basically. And she's betraying also her both the moderates and the Christian Democrats, because they had an agreement to work together in a bloc. They are open to create new blocs and new agreements. And this is what Annie Lööf, the Soros admirer, member of the Trilateral Commission, is doing. She is supported by the media and also by particularly there is a person coming up with his views. You see him on the right. He's a writer, but also the son of a prolific producer for the Swedish TV and radio. Standing up for the new formation, for the new globalist line that has been taken. So we're seeing a battle between these people, and I think that this will continue in time. They're younger and dedicated. There will be reformation going on slowly in the Swedish political discourse, I would
and
say.
Biljana, you're pointing out that Ms. Lööf is a Soros supporter, and one of the most conspicuous...
She said she admires him, yeah.
One of the most conspicuous attributes of each of these people, as far as being politicians goes, they're all very young, just like Ocasio Cortez.
Yeah. So another thing, Biljana, we're now on 2 hours of this broadcast, and I just want to make sure, I mean, I know you...
go to the next one if you
No, well, it's not that. I'm mindful of your time.
Thank you very much for letting me know. We are taking too long, but just reminder for you here that the Soros admirer Lööf was the person who made sure that through voting with her party, that 9,000, and it appears now to be more than 9,000, Afghan men who have no reason to have refugee status in Sweden or to seek asylum in Sweden, to stay in Sweden and study in Swedish high schools together with Swedish girls and boys. This is done despite the fact that I'm giving you here old statistics. The old statistics already from 2016 that is showing you that 95% of the grave rapes in Sweden were committed by non-Swedes, and you can see which countries they come from the most. This was an absolute taboo topic. We could not talk about it. This is the site that I was retweeting. Now, lots of media talked about it. It's acknowledged. It's a fact. None of them was fired because they talked about it. When they do talk about it, because they want to control the topic, so to say. But the fact is that despite this, knowing the statistics, the high factors of probability of rape, already in 2016, her party and Love herself, the Soros admirer, decided to keep these people in Sweden without any asylum reason. That is a very special situation, and I think this is what enrages lots of Swedish people. How could that happen? Given that the rapes are actually continuing to happen, they're increasing, explosions are happening almost on a daily basis. 250 cars are burned last year only in one town, Gothenburg. The chain migration that I read in your American media, that there is an agreement, even the New Yorker had written about it, there is an agreement that the migration is getting less and they're going to stop immigration. There is no such thing at all. The laws for migration are from 2016 and they continue to be in power now. Anybody can, or let's say they have been denied asylum seeker status, they can still apply again and again and again, and there is no physical deportation. I try to find information about it for RT and Sputnik, and there is no veritable information of who are the physical deportations that have been performed and how many are there. There is only decisions, and from that moment on, these people are free to do whatever they want. So I did for you anyway statistics and I really went through the data very carefully, and to tell you that from 2013 to 2018, the residents awarded in Sweden are less than 1 million. They are 806,000. So you see that the numbers are actually increasing. So for 2017, they were 145,000, let's say, of which very few are actual refugees. And within refugees, they actually include numbers of students and asylum seekers, and there's a different categories. For 2018, these were estimates. We have to see what the final number was, but this was about the estimates. So you see that there is no such thing as decreased migration, and actually the chain migration is expected to increase because these immigrants that were coming as individuals, alone individuals and so on, and all of a sudden now they have to have their families coming with them. So the big battle today, I think, in the society, although it's not discussed officially, is the chain migration. Yeah, you could go to the next slide if you want to hurry. Again, I want to address this basic falsehood and error. It is error. To call the Sweden Democrats far right, because they are a leftist party which is interested in restricting migration and protecting the borders of Sweden. That's all it is. So their main concept that they strive for, vision they have for Sweden, is folkhemmet. And folkhemmet already when created by Social Democrats was the home of the people. Home of the people. You're protecting that home from whatever, criminals, invaders, whatever. You have a door, you're closing the door, you're opening the door, you have a lock, and so on. So that is the kind of the vision, the metaphor that you could stay with, the folkhem, the people's home. And this is the ideology of this party. So they cannot be called far right. They are not even right. If you read their economic program, it is a social democrat economic program that wants to keep the welfare in Sweden.
Whoa.
They are continuing, I mean, this entire craziness with calling these people voters for that party that are growing. There are more than 1 million people that are voting for this party, that want to restrict the violence and want to protect the borders. Now the liberals, so not only the center party, but now lately one woman from Sundsvall, Viksten, from Liberals Party, has complained that she has been asked by extremists. She said that she doesn't want Nazis in the Swedish government, and by this she's actually referring to the Sweden Democrats. The Sweden Democrats consist of the voters are more than 1 million. So her salary is actually paid as a representative in her party, is actually, or whatever, even her party existence is actually paid by these taxpayers. And these taxpayers she's calling Nazis. So it is okay to be funded by Nazis, but it is not okay to be asked the question by these people. So the moment some people went and wanted to ask questions, they were upset. Maybe they were the parents or relatives of raped girls, and people are getting over their sadness now. They're getting angry. So instead of they're creating, the Liberal Party and the Center Party are creating a craziness around the Sweden Democrats, which are, most of them are just regular people with regular jobs that want to have a normal life and protect Sweden as Sweden was before. On the other hand, at the same time, the Liberals and the Center Party have no problem with Islamic influence in the Swedish institutions. In fact, both of the parties are okay with having prayer calls from the mosques, loud prayer calls, which a lot of people are actually opposing. So what I've been doing lately is I've been observing how Islamic ideology has perpetrated Swedish institutions, and I've noticed that it has perpetrated them much more than I could have ever imagined, both the legislative institutions and governing institutions and educational institutions as well. So here you have a picture of one of the representatives of the Green Party, Mehmet Kaplan, who appeared to be associated with the Grey Wolves in Turkey, which is a huge and extreme Islamic party. On the next slide, you see another person with related to Muslim Brotherhood. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Nyamko Sabuni was a minister during the moderate government, Reinfeldt's government. She was a minister of gender equality in Sweden, and she was involved with education in Sweden. She's directly related to a person who is heading and representing the Muslim Organization for Human Rights, which is an arm of the Muslim Brotherhood. So you have already people that are on very high positions. By the way, these organizations in Sweden, the Muslims for Human Rights, are tax-paid organizations. So Swedish taxpayers are funding them. They are funding also this particular person, Sabuni, and her brother. They have access to information about anybody. And she's now involved in companies that are supporting newcomers, immigrants, to get jobs and welfare in Sweden. So you have a network of people that are associated with Muslim Brotherhood that has infiltrated even the highest position of society. You have, for instance, also Sultan Kayhan. I again hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. She represents the Social Democrats. She's in parliament, and she has been seen to cooperate with the the gray wolves, and again the gray wolves from Turkey, an extremist Islamic party.
What's being
She was
pointed out
confronted
to
about it.
us? What's being pointed out to us here in this photo, Beliana?
Yes, they are showing here that she's discussing election blankets, notes, election notes, and she's yeah, it's not, there was some kind of investigation about it, but I haven't seen really a recording of her conversation so that we could know exactly what they were really talking about. You can really speculate about it, but they were seen together with the representative of the gray wolves. And if you're discussing the election ballots together with the gray wolves, it means that you're planning something. And yet what else can you cannot really know unless you see them or record them or have access to their email exchanges or something like that. She was confronted about this in media.
Is this her brother?
No, it was a
different.
different name. This was Kai Han, and this is Bai Lan. They're very similar indeed. This person is still minister, and notice he's the minister of energy. Look what he's saying here. He's saying that he wants to promote the households' competitive prices. What kind of competitive prices can you have when most of the energy so-called companies are actually subsidized by the government? And the main installation of energy in Sweden is owned by the state. One of the biggest energy suppliers company is also by majority owned by the state, Vattenfall. The other companies are getting subsidies by the state. So competitive prices, it's a very strange expression to say because this is not what's going on. What I am interested in is that we have this person to be responsible minister for Swedish energy. I mean, energy is like, it's the bloodline of a country. Sweden has big energy resources. So who is actually taking care of the energy business in Sweden? So lately I noticed that Dagens Nyheter was attacking one woman a Swedish person who was working for a Swedish company, not company, but government-owned company, regulating energy and owning the main equipment for energy transfer in Sweden. And if Dagens Nyheter is attacking her, that is Bonnier Media, who are extremely Soros related. They're as if I'm reading Soros' mind when I'm reading them. So if they are persecuting someone, it means that they have a plan. Something is going on. Usually they do it without really good evidence. But this person, Saira Aladdin, who I've never heard of, I don't know who it is, but this person has been promoted as the energy woman of the year for last year.
She seems quite young to hold a role
like
that.
Quite young.
And quite
so
tattooed.
You're seeing now, yes, I mean, she could be a very good engineer, I guess, or I really don't know what her, if she's an engineer, but in any case, she has been voted as the energy woman of the year. The other woman, on the other hand, is heavily attacked. So I'm speculating here, just my own interpretation, but what I'm saying is that the energy resources in Sweden are started to be controlled in a different way than what we probably would like to see. You see here another expression of the Islamic influence, and we have a woman quite known by now, Layla, who actually won a position in parliament. And she is in parliament right now, representing the Green Party again. the Green Party actually got into parliament thanks to her, and she made her entire campaign in not only on Facebook, but also live in her own language. She comes from Somalia. So a lot of Somalis who live in Sweden voted for her. And they were, if you look at the next slide, you could read about clan voting. So people started complaining that entire clans are voting. So you're not voting as we think that it's an individual decision. Each adult individual has informed herself or himself, and they are voting with their own beliefs. They should not be influenced. But what we see with the so-called clan voting is that you vote because member of your family or your clan voted for this person. They will represent this interest, so everybody votes there, and that without even knowing Swedish. They read all this information only in Somali. Because of that, this election has been very heavily criticized. As you can see here, a reminder that the migrant-heavy areas vote for Social Democrats' benefits, because just before hours before the election, the Social Democrats sent SMSs to lots of people in these migrant-heavy areas and offered them benefits if they vote for them. So do expect Cortez to do this. Oh, yeah. If she's going to have anything to say about this, she will do exactly this kind of tricks. And you can see that the red line represents the social democrats, and they are heavily supported by people living in these migrant-heavy areas, mainly because this is the only way they're going to keep their benefits. During the election night, if you remember, when I was telling you what's going on live, we experienced this situation that you can see now on the slide that others also noticed, that I was trying to show you the results as they happen, and all of a sudden the results were not available. So we have the yellow column that you see is actually the Sweden Democrats' results, and at one point, exactly when they had so many votes, all of a sudden the report at the election site disappeared. So no one could get more information about the election results. And we were told, I actually asked a friend online, where do I find it and where do I look? I want to see the election results fresh as they come, like fresh bread. And we had to look actually at the government-owned TV, and the TV told us that what the election results were, and all of a sudden the yellow line, as you can see, has become much less.
So well, that seems totally legitimate.
Yes, so a lot of people started the petition and wanted a re-election, a new election, because of this situation, and because of the clan voting. And cheating with ballots, hiding ballots, involvement of others meddling in the election, for instance, the gray wolves, and so on. So a lot of people actually want to have a re-election now, and they are hoping that the negotiation process is going to fail and there will be a new election. We can go to the next slide in regard of time. A very important topic. I mean, it's such a big topic that I wonder if I will ever have in my lifetime to write about it, because I've observed it so much and I would like to be able to write about it. But this is the editor and owner of a newspaper called GP, Göteborgs-Posten. His name is Herne. He lives very close to me where I live. I walk my dog exactly in that area. And he most explicitly, before the election, lobbied for Macron-type politics. He used even the same words as the Soros admirer Löf uses. Framåt. Let's march forwards, not backwards.
Oh, God.
March forward. No one understands what does that really mean, backwards. So we should not look back at the security or the welfare or the way we've created that welfare. We should look forward. We have absolutely no idea what is going to happen, given that our borders are open and our children are raped on daily basis.
Wow.
That's horrible.
So sorry?
That's horrible.
It is horrible, and there is no other word for it anymore. The Göteborgs-Posten's editor is actually lobbying. He is not doing journalism. He's using the newspaper that is subsidized with tax money to lobby. And that is not journalism. We have no journalism in Sweden anymore. The main media that we rely on are lobby machines, and that's what it is. The only thing we can do is to study how they lobby and what they're going to do next. Who are they going to assassinate next? What are they going to lie about next? They have to mix some lies, some truth. They have to mix things. So they can be read but you see here that there are so many arsons, so many explosions, so many cars have been blown. Here are direct descriptions of a number of them.
So that's not green energy.
No.
That is not green energy at all. And the people who did the arsons and many cars, like more than 75 cars were burned in Gothenburg not long ago. I didn't see any of them really arrested or convicted.
There's a police car right here.
Yeah, police cars are burned too.
Jeez. So when you say assassinations,
stations are burned.
What's that?
Police stations are burnt. Grenades are thrown into the police stations and the cars. The officers themselves are under attack in their own homes.
Wow. I mean, this sounds like a civil war. When you say, Biljana, that they're assassinating people, do you mean actual assassinations?
No. I said
symbolic
assassinations. I meant symbolic assassinations.
Financial
but
and
of course,
otherwise.
so once some of the people that they career and character assassinate commit suicide.
Wow.
And they can't make it. They can't survive it. People react differently to this. I survived it when they did this to me. I survived it, and I really don't. I'm not at all. Just the opposite. I find them very amusing. But there are people who actually committed suicide when they were assassinated in the main media, and everybody talks about them, and they lost their career and their meaning of life. And if you whatever happens is definitely not making you happier and stronger and more determined to live a normal and happy, healthy life.
But of course, the hallmark of it
on daily basis. Sorry.
And the hallmark of it, of course, is censorship.
Yes, censorship. But it's I wish I really could write about this because it is very much into the line of my research on discourse analysis. If you see how they do it, it's an extremely sloppy job of presenting people with very little evidence, presenting them in very negative light, and in zero time, these people's lives are severely damaged. From that moment on, they continue with the Soros ideology and the Soros politics. We are talking specifically about Dagens Nyheter. They have been doing this for years. Their strategies are as far from journalism as you can get. They do know the language and they do write correctly. They punctuate and so on. But it's a heavy ideological artillery. If you say something critical to Soros, this newspaper will immediately call you anti-Semite and a Nazi or anything on the planet. Pure abuse. There is no discussion on the value of the ideology or the value of the ideas or our sovereignty, our control over our personal lives. and their power and right to affect our lives. On this, here I'm showing the latest events. You see the picture of Katrina Janusz, who has become the leader of the Yellow Vests, the Swedish Yellow Vests. She was pushed to do it. She's attacked by the journalist, the person in the middle with the mustache, you see, with the black mustache. He's a journalist who calls basically everybody who does not support globalist views for Dagens Nyheter. It's called a Nazi or brown. For some reason they call them brown. I still don't understand why brown should be such a bad color. Everybody is brown. But Janusz is Jewish. So she's equally attacked by Dagens Nyheter as she's attacked by so-called others called Nazis, or people with national socialist views, or people with who call themselves resistance to the establishment here, North Front. So she's attacked by all sides, and she has managed to gather around herself people who associate with the Yellow Vests in France and the Yellow Vests in England. People who are basically shocked by the violence and who want to do something and change this for the good.
Well, Biljana, thank you for yet another engaging but distressing report. And you know, my takeaway from all this is I'm going to ask you what I asked you the last time we were on air together. The reason you live in Sweden is why?
Yes, good question. Good question. When you live here, as I live here, I see. I'm very interested in the process because I live in a very special historical moment. I'm witnessing a very special historical moment, and I see how it is dissolved into the normal daily life. You go to work, you come home, you go buy food. What happens then? You know, how can people deal with these extremely difficult issues when you have professionals? I mean, the organization of Expo and the newspapers, Dagens Nyheter, Svenska Dagbladet, Aftonbladet, and Expressen, which are comprised by the Bonnier Group and Schibsted Group, two that have monopoly in the Swedish media. They censor even brutally other people, attacking them as they are attacking her, and that is very interesting to me. You know, how does it affect people, and how do people change, and how can their voices be heard? How can their pain and suffering be more visible, become more visible despite all the censorship? Is it really happening? And I have to tell you that in the process of time, and very much thanks to your help, as we are talking here, we're actually doing something despite the censorship, and very much thanks to you, Charles, and you, Jason. We have managed to kind of challenge the barrier of what can be said, for instance, with respect to the massive gang rapes.
Well, thank you so much.
And now it's a topic that we can actually talk about openly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Biljana. That's an amazing report, very interesting, and I hope the viewers will circulate this around to their friends. And what we would like to do now, because it's now 2.5 hours. I will fly through the remainder of the slides. There's just a few points.
Thank you for the time.
No, my pleasure. Thank you. So we go to the next one very quickly. I put this up here as background for people who are trying to understand my concerns about Sweden and the Clinton Foundation involvement in Sweden. This is information that explains that the Swedish operations of the Clinton Foundation began in 2011, and we point you to the actual audit report where there's a footnoted disclosure. But the issue here is that, as far as I can tell, looking at it from a simplistic approach, the Clinton Foundation had no need to set up a fundraising operation in Sweden. They already had one in Little Rock. that could fundraise globally. There was no specially good reason to do this. And in fact, at the time they were doing this, perhaps unbeknownst to the Swedish government, the Clinton family destroyed the foundation on the 2nd of November 2013. The Clinton family illegally took control of the parent company, placing its legal status in, I call it a radioactive position. I mean, it was not a foundation, not a public charity. So the Clinton people who were dealing in Sweden, raising money in Sweden, were lying to the Swedish authorities, who obviously didn't mind being lied to because they didn't bother to check any of this. And it just reeks to high heaven. If we go to the next page, I know you're, Jason, fond of bringing up Eric Braverman. Now, Eric Braverman was made CEO of the Clinton Foundation in July of 2013 and left under suspicious circumstances, in my view, early in January 2015. As a guest, Eric Braverman, being somebody who is highly educated and very experienced, probably kept his emails. And I would bet that if one could find those emails, which would have flown through many servers all over the world, many governments have these emails, one would probably see Eric Braverman being extremely concerned and raising issues about, we have this conduit operation in Canada that's raising money. We're not telling people what's really going on. Then we have one in the UK, not telling people. We're not really consolidating our operations around the world into one actual consolidated financial statement that's required. And as a bet, there was a fight back and forward, starting by July 2013, that culminated in early January, I want to say January 9th or thereabout, 2015, with Eric Braverman vanishing before the election process started, where Hillary was going to try to do her best with Obama's backing to seize power in the United States of America. So this is additional background here for people to look at. If we go to the next page, and I did promise I'd do this quickly. This is really a fascinating thing. I went into WikiLeaks, and don't do it now, Jason, but this is the link to the actual WikiLeaks back and forth between John Podesta and some unknown person in the Hillary Clinton campaign. The significance of this, Biljana, and the viewership is that this interchange occurs on Wednesday, July 8th, 2015 in the morning. This is the FBI, the Inspector General of the Intelligence Committee on July 6, 2015, triggered a report, or issued a report, which mandated an investigation of Hillary Clinton for mishandling classified information on July 6th. Here's an email 2 days later, which is just very lackadaisical. We need to get a bit of time here. John Podesta says, I need to sit down with Hillary. And the answer comes back, well, she's got to pick up Charlotte to babysit Charlotte. And
Charles, sorry, isn't this Huma Abedin, H.A.?
It could well be. It could well be Huma Abedin.
Yeah.
And Oscar is Oscar Flores, who's basically the paid butler of the Clinton family, and how he gets paid, I don't know. He has a stomach virus. Bill Clinton is out buying Clorox wipes yesterday to wipe down Chappaqua. I mean, this is happening. Right? Does not appear to be two people who are terribly concerned that the Inspector General of the Intelligence Committee, which is a powerful operation in the United States, has now triggered an FBI investigation.
Got to get those handy wipes.
Got to clean up Chappaqua, right? We don't
want flu and staphylococcus flying around.
Yeah, I mean, it's just so the contrast between these are lackadaisical. I don't care. It's no big deal. We're going to win. We got this. We got it locked. We'll get this across the line. You go to the next page. A lot of chat on how we have to raid Paul Manafort's house. How now Donald Trump is enslaved to the Russian interests. This is really something. I mean, when you look, and don't pull up the links, Jason, because I know we're pressed for time, but people can look at John Podesta's background. He was in a senior position at the worst moments of the Clinton Foundation, the impeachment drama in the final period. He gets an interest in this private entity, Joule Unlimited, or a bunch of these Joule companies, that Podesta is asked to go on the board of this, and he gets a sweetheart deal to buy stock options and securities in this company, which then enters into agreements with portions of the Russian government where it agrees to put large amounts of money into a shell company. And I think, and I haven't seen the whole background here because we only get some of Podesta's emails, but it sure looks to me as if John Podesta and his brother, Tony Podesta, who had this gigantic business that's now been liquidated, I think, or closed down, representing people who were supplicants before the Obama administration, supplicants into the swamp, and may have included foreign government interests. It certainly included foreign parties. I doubt whether John Podesta made full and fair disclosure of his economic interests. And what he's trying to say here is that he sold out at the end of 2013. But when we go through this trail here, what I see, particularly down here, is that what Podesta actually may have done is transferred his economic interest after the fact. He said he transferred it early on, but in fact he transferred it later to a member of his family.
They're in a regular practice of doing stuff like that. I was just listening to a report last night. It slips my mind who was doing that report, but that, it was Chris Simpson. Tony Podesta was in a regular practice of leasing art that he owned to his own firm to display it in the firm. You can't do that.
You actually can do it, but what you can't do it, and it's like speeches. You can't. You could do it. There's a fair market value for the art and the lease rate, but probably what he was doing is saying, you know, this finger drawing that my granddaughter did over here is
no, it was like weird pedo stuff.
Yeah, well, I'm just saying stuff that you would say is, you know, less valuable than a used piece of newspaper. Suddenly this thing is worth $2 million and you charge. That's not legal.
But wait a minute, you're telling me there's not some kind of tax scheme hiding in there where he's leasing his own personal art to his company and getting some kind of benefit? I mean, point being, they're investigating the hell out of anybody who knows Donald Trump, and here's all this screwy business, including stuff with Russia. Why isn't Mueller over there investigating Podesta's?
Well, and remember, those of you who remember the various broadcasts, the 23 November 2011 just happens to be almost exactly the day that Podesta is having meetings with the Clintons up in Chappaqua to get the oral report back from Simpson Thatcher about whether the Clinton Foundation is trouble or not. And here he's getting this email. Hey, John, Secretary Chu is going to be visiting. Secretary Chu is the energy secretary under Obama, the first one, is going to be visiting this Jules lab, which John Podesta ends up having an economic interest in. He's getting a heads up about that. At the same time that Simpson Thatcher, he's leading for the Clintons because Bruce Lindsay had a stroke. He's leading an exercise to figure out, is the Clinton Foundation, you know, crooked or not? And he's getting a heads up that, hey, one of your investments could be worth more money because a cabinet member is going to visit it. I mean, the contrast here between obvious clues, reeking evidence, you know, as I say, radioactive defects in the Clinton Foundation and the Clinton record, you know, it's going on now since before January 20th, 1993. You know, can't investigate that, but let's leak like a sieve to the New York Times and the Washington Post. Let's have Mueller going crazy, you know, about this Russian collusion delusion, which I think is high time Donald Trump, you know, and the people who are working with Donald Trump, they need to bring their A-plus game out to the table this week. Enough of this.
I'm curious to hear about the oral report from Bill Clinton. That seems like
Bill Clinton. That always two.
That would take a lot of time to deliver.
Right.
Well, Charles, Bilyana, it's been quite a presentation today. Is there anything else we wanted to cover, Charles?
No, I think just be safe, stay warm, use energy responsibly.
Exactly.
Don't burn any cars.
No, don't burn any cars. And Bilyana, thank you so much for bringing us that firsthand report from Sweden. It's always a pleasure to have you on the show. I hope that things will improve there. And want to thank everybody for joining us. Want to thank our generous sponsors. Don't forget, everyone, that Crowdsource the Truth is viewer sponsored. So please go to patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth and become a sponsor. You can also make a one-time sponsorship payment at paypal.me/crowdsourcethetruth. I want to thank our guest, Dr. Bilyana Martinovsky, and of course, Charles, lovely to be with you.
Thank you.
We'll see you on Wednesday when you'll be closing in. Thank you, Bilyana.
Thanks, Bilyana.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Charles, and thank you to all your viewers and audience.
Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow. Don't forget, new show with the Moriartys, Unseen Libya, tomorrow, only on Patreon.